So in the last episode, we discussed what to do if you feel undermined by your wife. And in this one, you wanted to talk about what to do if you feel undermined by your kids. As one of your kids, I can tell you I've never undermined you in my life, and I have no idea what you're going to talk about in this episode. So please enlighten me. What does that even look like?
Yes. I will back up to put this in context, because it's really fascinating. When we went to the counselor for marriage counseling, he said, and there were things that were going on with our kids, and we're like, okay, I need to work on this or that with the kids. And the counselor said, well, quite frankly, this is the way that it works. You come to me and you say, hey, there's something going on with my kids, and people do this all the time. And I say, okay, I want to work with you and your husband first, or your husband and your wife, you and your wife first. And the people are like, no, the problem is my kids. And he'll say, no. Like, the kids are always a manifestation of the husband-wife relationship. So the difficulties and challenges that are going on with your kids, and sure, they're all unique and they have their different things, they are responding to what's happening in the husband-wife relationship. And it's like, whoa. And if you're not willing to work on your relationship, what's going to happen is I'm going to start working with your kids, and all I'm going to do is I can work on just the symptoms on the top, but I can't get to the root cause. And the root cause comes down to, you and your wife and how you run the household and how you interact with the kids. So, the first thing to know is that, if you feel like you're being undermined by your kids, look at your relationship, number one, with God. Where are you at with your prayer life, your sacraments? And then secondly, really big, where are you at with your relationship with your wife? Get that where it needs, both of those where they need to be. And then you have a foundation to stand on to actually pull up the mountain your children and to be able to work with them. Because if you're feeling undermined by your kids, there's several things that can be going on. The two big ones, for sure, one is they may just be reflecting and speaking the upset that's going on between that your wife is feeling towards you. So if your child is undermining you, it's just like, it's because they may be ticked off. And I had an experience where, my own life where something that had gone on with my dad. And so I started to be between my dad and my mom, and I thought the way that my dad had acted towards my mom was unjust. And so I started to be really gruff with my dad and kind of huffing. He'd say things, and I'd be like, and I was really disrespectful. What was really happening is I was mad at him because of the way that he was interacting with my mom. So it was like injustice. I was trying to stand up for, and I didn't realize this, I was a little kid, but looking back now, it's like, that's totally what was happening. So on the one hand, your child could be responding to, and this is, when you're getting undermined, you need to look behind it, what's happening. Because surely, if my dad had just corrected me and said, Michael, you shouldn't be gruff towards me, and be like, or, disrespectful or huffing at me. And I would say, okay, okay, I shouldn't. And I would just comply because he told me to comply. He would have needed to dig deeper to say, what's going on? Tell me something. And again, this is a good technique. Tell me, and it's a good technique where you do both sides of it. Tell me something that I'm doing well, or maybe two things that I'm doing well that you want me to continue. And then tell me one thing, just one, that you want me to correct. Pick the one thing that you want me to correct. The good thing with it doesn't become a dump session because you start with the good things. And there were good things that my dad was doing, far more than the bad things. And so we get on the table, and it sets the relationship right. Just like when you're praising God, the first thing you need to do, you start with thanksgiving, and then that sets you right in your relationship with God. Then you can move towards petition. And so when I start with my dad, it would have been appropriate to say, well, gosh, I really appreciate that. You're taking care of us. You keep the utilities on, blah, blah, blah. And then on the flip side, it's just like, okay, if I can change one thing, I probably, be aware, Dad, would have told him not the biggest thing, because I probably would have been scared to tell him the biggest thing. And the biggest thing was I think you're being, the way that you acted was disrespectful towards Mom. So the way that you can do that is that you ask them, just expect they're going to give you the easy ball first and say well, I'd appreciate it if you would, sometimes come to my track meet or something. It's like, okay. And so I'll try to do that. And then if you're courageous, Dad, and it's something you can handle, and that was kind of a softball, then just say, is there anything else Is there anything else? Like, I think I can handle one more. Give me one more. And they might get enough courage to say, and if they kind of wait and then like, oh, they're thinking there's something that they're deciding, are they going to tell you or not? And don't force them. Just know, that there's a big monster back there that, it's kind of scary to them to let you know what's going on. And so that's fine. If they're not ready, they're not ready. But, out of love for them, you want to come back because that monster is eating away at your relationship. That's the underminer, is that monster of their upset towards you. So the first thing is they could be, their upset could be over your relationship with your spouse. Another common big one is your relationship with them. Like back to the, you don't come to my track meet. The only time that you talk to me is you're correcting me, and you're asking me about school. And it's like, you never ask about, like, you don't seem to really care about me, but you just care about, am I hitting my marks? Am I getting good grades? Am I, making my accomplishments in sports? And then that comes down to, is like, is that all you really care about? Do you care about me, the person behind those accomplishments, and the difficulties that went into those accomplishments, or the fact that I didn't make those accomplishments? Like, am I mud now? Am I worthless? And so if you're being undermined, that's another area where it's going to be, it's just like, am I really, the question I have to ask as a dad, am I really focusing in on paying attention to my child, delighting in my child, looking for the good in my child, and saying, like, what are some things, again, that because you can go both ways, to ask, to say to them, like, here's two things that you're doing well. Your child might melt like butter when you say those two things, and you might decide not to bring up the thing that you want them to change, because you realize, oh my gosh, like, this is the first time my child has responded to me so positively. So decide whether or not you're going to bring up the thing that you want to change. And don't just throw out the good thing, throw up really quickly the good things, so that you can quickly get to the one that you don't want. Like, look for something that's really good, that you appreciate, that you see your child. Like, I notice that you're always taking out the trash, or I notice that that you're helping your little brother, get dressed in the morning. It's like, I really appreciate it. Or I notice that, you jump in and help with dinner with your mom. Like, I really appreciate it. You say that, and that could be like balm to them. They could say, like, oh, you noticed? Like, I didn't know that you noticed. Like, thank you. So when you do this back to your children and bring up some of the good things that they've done, you may just say, let's stop there. Like, we've made good progress. But then with those two, it's easier, if you build that up to come back and say, one thing I'd ask you to change is this thing over here. And now you have to know, my wife is good at saying, listen, who's the child here? Who's the parent? And so sometimes when I remember times when you would bring things up to me, and like, I would want to, my defensive side would want to say, well, wait a second, you didn't understand that right, and there was more that was going on, and defend myself, as opposed to just saying, okay, let me think about that. Let me see what I can do to change that. And even if there's a lot of other things going on, there's obviously something that's bothering them. And if I love them, I want to change. If I love you, I want to change that thing that's really bothering you. If it's something that's easy to change and it makes sense. So, and a lot of times it does. And it's and even if it's a tough thing to change, if I love my child, like, I want to change the things that are hurting them. And it is a glorious moment if you've set enough of a stage that they feel comfortable enough to tell you how you're offending them, because you represent God in their life. And for them to come against you and say, what you're doing wrong is really hard for a child. And so, like, don't push them on that. It's important to try to look for it for them. And maybe even if you think you know what it is, say, I have been thinking about, like, I saw you the other day when I was talking to mom, and I talked harshly towards mom, and I saw the look on your face, and that wasn't right. And I apologized to mom, but like, I need to apologize to you too, not just because you saw it, but because she's your mom and she doesn't deserve to be treated that way. And it wasn't just offensive to her; it was offensive to you, and like, I apologize for that.
It's a form of intimacy on behalf of the child to come forward and be vulnerable enough to say, this is bothering me. Because I think in the moment, because I remember some of the times that I came to you because I was really frustrated about something, and looking back now, I could see that you were getting really defensive. And in the moment for you, I don't think you saw that as me trying to work on our relationship by pointing out the things that weren't good. You saw that as me like attacking you in your position as father. And there were times where you would pull the, well, you know what? I'm the dad and this is the way it's going to be. And those weren't the moments that helped grow our relationship. The moments that helped grow our relationship were when there was something that I felt was unjust and we did talk it through. And sometimes whatever it was changed. Sometimes I came to a deeper understanding of what was going on because you were willing to have the discussion with me.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I love the wording of intimacy because we're made for intimacy. We're made in the likeness and image of God, who is a community of persons in an eternal exchange of love. That's the definition of the Holy Trinity, which is the mystery that we can never define, but some understanding of it. Well, if you know that, and you know that that's what you're made for, then and when you look at some of the icons, you have the Father gazing at the Son, and the Son gazing at the Father, and the Holy Spirit, like the gaze between them, and you start to understand like we're made for intimacy, and intimacy is into me see, like that you have an idea of like, where is this person coming from, and where am I coming from? And so in that vulnerability where I share where I'm coming from, there's a way in which that like we grow in love. Because it's like, oh, okay, like I understand you, but like knowledge of you is helping me to have more feelings toward you, like loving feelings, because like I know you better. And the other side, when you feel understood, when it's just like, oh, like that must have really hurt when I said that, and you say yes, and at that point I need to, I've learned this, not blame, complain, or explain, like just close my mouth, just in that moment sit with the connection of being like, this is tough, and then you can feel understood. And a lot of times after you feel understood, you will come back, or I, in a relationship where it's like, okay, I feel understood now it's easier for me to try to understand you, and to where it's like, okay, you know what? And I'm sure that I was kind of a jerk and I was disrespectful in the way that I said this to you. And so what happens is that now you've outed yourself, and that's far more powerful than if I do it. Because if I do it, I'm kind of doing it in a judgment, like, well, you were disrespectful. But if you say, like I was, because my goal is for you to see it and to change. And if you already tell me that you see it and that you're going to work on it, like I feel relieved. I don't feel like I need to parent you through this. And and from the other side of it, it's like if I out myself, to you, you can feel like, okay, dad's kind of getting it, and he's listening this time. Maybe he'll listen next time. And what's that? That's friendship. That's intimacy. And sure, absolutely, there is the hierarchy of parents and children, and there are some things that you can't go into depth with your children about. Like I get that. I relied too much on the hierarchy when I wasn't really paying attention more to loving you, and I was just trying to check things off the list and move on and be like, okay, I got that handled next, as opposed to, did I handle it well? Did I handle it in a way that we grew in love with each other?
At the beginning of the movie Hitch, Will Smith says that 90% of communication isn't coming out of your mouth. A lot of it's tone, a lot of it's body language. And I have to be honest, I've never been a fan of the compliment sandwich. That let me tell you two good things that you're doing, and then I'm going to tell you one bad thing. The reason why is because I felt like I need, like what was actually happening was that the person was saying, I have this bad thing that I need to tell you. And you are too stupid, too emotional, too negative to get it. So I'm going to butter you up with two good things that I don't actually believe and had no interest in telling you in the first place. But because I have to tell you this negative thing, I'm going to tell you the two positive things just to butter the whole thing up. And I think the reason why is because often the 90% of communication on those two positive things is that they don't actually matter because they never come up in any context other than when I have something negative to say. And this, it's funny because you've complimented me countless times over the course of my life. I remember specifically only one of them. And it had nothing to do with you prepping me for something, for some constructive criticism. It was for the first 5 years of my career working with my film company was in the back of the garage. I had a Honda Accord 6 inches behind me and a wall right in front of me. But to my right was a door, and behind that door was you in your office. And there was one point, I had headphones on, I was editing, I was listening to music, I don't remember. I took them off and you were on the phone with somebody, I don't know who. You didn't know I was listening, and you were saying, the thing that's great about John Andrew is he has a way with story where he'll make things, he'll make connections in these interviews that I would not have seen without him. And I remember that to this day because you had no vested interest in me hearing that. There was no ulterior motive. And so I think that what you said earlier about starting with the two positive things and then sometimes realizing you need to stop there kind of actually reflects that you as a parent need to have a relationship with your kids, and frankly, kids need to have with their parents a relationship where there is plenty of affirmation without strings. Because if you're only ever giving compliment sandwiches, you're almost saying these compliments are contingent on you fixing this part of yourself. I only love you if you do these things to become good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a dangerous precedent to set with your kids.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. And I think right on track, and it's revelatory for people who are listening. My own weakness that I was really out of tune. I mean, just even you recall, bringing this up just shows how much my head was in a space of trying to get things done and get my agenda taken care of, and not being really in tune to say, like, what does my child need? And then that question, which the counselor said, with regard to Maria, but it also applies directly to my kids. If you really love your kids, you want to give them what's good and what's the best. It's like, right, yeah, I agree. Now, what's the best for your child? The best for your child is for your child to be seen, for your child to be loved, for your child to feel delighted in. That's the sunshine that makes them grow. How often, am I doing that? And so clearly I was starving out my kids, like some of the undermining that I had. And I see it with some of the kids more than others, where I didn't give that sunshine. And then I'm complaining that the plant is sick. It's like, well, hello, I need to reflect the Father, and the Father in heaven delights in us, even when we have stinky diapers. And it's easier for me to look at a little child who's so cute with a stinky diaper, and I was like, okay, let's get that thing changed. And it's like almost this joyful event. It's like, ooh, and make light of it. That really stinks. That's gross. But it's not condemnatory. I'm not like, gosh, there you go, you're pooping again. It's like, well, welcome to the human race. We all do it. But the way that it's like, it's easier with a cute little child to accept that. Well, that doesn't change. We still need that same delighting in, even when we're doing emotional pooping on other people or on our parents. So I would say that was the revelation. And this is back to the counselor saying, if you want to fix your children, then the best thing that you can do is gaze upon them with delight. Look for the things that are good, that you can really appreciate, not the ones that you can say, well, that's easy, you did well on that test. No. You need to look to things that have to do with character and virtue and ways in which they sacrificed, because those things they have control over. They don't have control over necessarily. I mean, they can get control over your studying for test and doing well and putting in the effort. Sure, I get that. But then there's, and you can improve your talent, great. But there are some people whose talent level is so much more in various areas. And so they tend to get a lot of compliments there. And that's good. And both kids might put in 10 hours of work. And this one is just doing phenomenal after 10 hours of work. And this one is getting a B. And so, and whatever, in sports or whatever the thing is going to be. So more important really comes down to is what type of effort are you putting in? What's the virtue? What's the sacrifice? The widow's mite. The widow didn't put in more money than the other. She put in less, but what it meant to her was more significant. So I would say that it was a wake up call after the counseling, which again, we still, like, everything wasn't solved with the counseling. Don't want that to be to be the message, but it gave us tools so that we can solve far more. And he even said that. He's like, we're not going to resolve everything here, but I'm going to hand you tools so that you would be able to get closer to resolving stuff sooner. Then back to the kids, I started to realize, like, well, I need to do more to warm up the relationship with the kids. I need to as well understand where my kids are coming from. And so it became a more concerted effort for me to ask more questions and be quiet. And I remember this one day we had come home and it was time to start school. I was going to head into my office, and my daughter Mercedes got on her bike, and she said, "Hey, do you want to ride to the end of the block with me?" Which I hadn't been doing a lot of that. And so I just said, okay. And I remember thinking, I've got this meeting and this meeting. And then I almost stopped myself and just thought, did you realize you just said okay? And so, like, I went to get the bike quickly, to get it over with. And so we rode to the end of the block, and something about riding to the end of the block gave me enough time and the air blown in my face that I kind of momentarily was able to set aside all the tasks that I was going to get done that day. And then we rode back to the driveway. And as we got off, she said, "Well, let me tell you about my bike." And at that point, like, I'm struggling because it's like, okay, I already took time. And internally, I didn't, I was trying not to show that, but I'm sure I showed that. The kids pick all that up. And so, I stopped with her and I said, okay. And I was like, what you going to show me? It's a bike. And she pointed out the bell and she said, "Well, this is actually a communication device. And so I can use that as a spy, and I can communicate with other spies in the neighborhood." And then she pointed to the handlebar, and this actually has a pole that comes out of it, and I can use it like as this weapon. And she started to describe this whole console in front of her that wasn't visible to my eyes, but it was in her imagination. And I like, my jaw was dropping. It was funny. It was interesting. It was super creative. And as she went through the litany, I felt myself saying, "You almost missed this. Like, do you realize that this is your precious daughter, and you had no idea of this entire world that was going on every time she got on a bike?" And this probably happened with your younger kids, which is your older kids, which is a point of regret, and you don't know anything about it. and you were just blessed for this one moment that she let you into that world. And it was like, oh my gosh, Lord. And it was like I learned things about her that I didn't know before. And I thought, and I found out that her sisters knew she did that. I didn't. Her mom probably knew. I didn't. And so after that, I came into my office and I sat down and I just thought, well, like, first of all, thank you, God, that I didn't miss that, because I almost missed it and I could have missed it for my lifetime. And secondly, it's like, look, it took another 5 minutes. And how many times do I blow 5 minutes looking up something on the internet, reading an article, doing something else. And it's just like, and that went into my child. And so that shifted. That was a shift where I was like, oh my gosh, like, what else am I missing? What else have I been clueless to? And so what happened with that is that, like, the next time she asked me, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. And then it started to be like, hey, who wants to ride to the end of the block? And it became this thing with my younger daughters where we would ride to the end of the block, and we would ride a scooter, and I would call it my commute to work. So we would ride down and we'd ride around the neighborhood and we'd come back. And because I could have been commuting to work, but I didn't have, my work was at home. So like that became my new commute, and how that changed our relationship. Like, I got to know them better. I got to know their personalities better, and they started to like me more. So I was liking them more because I was delighting in them, because it was really cool stuff to delight in. I was like, wow, look at this little creative personality, all the things she's coming up with. So I was falling in love with her, and the other kids in a way that it's like that wasn't happening before, but they were starting to fall in love and like me more. And so guess what happened? I got undermined less. There were times that they would come alongside and put their arm around me and hug me and say, thanks, Dad, I really love you. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a front-loaded proposition. When it comes to relationship building, doing the right things, looking to delight in my children from the get-go, makes a huge difference in being able to parent them and for their openness to me. And so the sorrow in that is that I look back at what I missed and what I didn't give you and your siblings, and at times that's really a hard cross to carry. And my consolation is that God fills in the gaps for the older kids, and it's never too late. So it's like, what can I do to fill in? Yet I can see the difference that it's making with the younger kids. And I'm like, Lord, thank you. Thank you that you blessed us with a large family so that, this numbskull could begin to learn and do some better things for the younger kids, and actually go from parenting and checking boxes with parenting to actually beginning to enjoy it and say, like, this is cool. Like, I love this. I look forward now to reading with the kids at night and to doing our morning scooter commute.
I actually want to draw attention to something that you just said that's kind of been going through my mind as you're talking, is that making that transition from checking the boxes of parenting to enjoying it requires you to start by checking the boxes. Because you said that while I was younger, you were so involved with all the tasks you had to do with work. And something we were just talking about before we started recording the podcast was how there are a bunch of different things happening with Strong Catholic Dad right now. And the only way that I can keep track of all of my responsibilities without going crazy is to write down an extremely detailed to-do list, so that I know when I create this graphic, I can check that off. And then I know at the end of the day, once they're all checked off, I've done everything. That's the only way I keep track of it. And so often in our work, whether it's Asana, whether it's Daylight, whether it's all these different apps that keep track of what we're trying to do, we're very, very careful to be detailed about our responsibilities and whether or not we've accomplished them. But then for some reason, when it comes to our relationships, I think that for you and me, and I think for a lot of men, putting in the time does not come naturally. It's not something that I'm like, you know what, man, for me personally, I don't think, I haven't called this sibling in a week, I need to call them again. Instead, it's like, wow, I haven't called that sibling in like 8 months. I think I probably should call them again. Sometimes we have to recognize our own weaknesses, recognize our own patterns, recognize our own behaviors, and say, as bad as this might sound, I have to put on the calendar that I'm going to call this sibling. Or for a parent, as bad as this might sound, I literally have to create a to-do list to remind myself that every day I'm going to spend 5 minutes with my daughter, and then I'm going to check it out. I had the opportunity to actually see, there's a CEO of a Catholic company that brings in hundreds of millions of dollars who I got to have a one-on-one meeting with. It was crazy. I was totally unqualified to be in that meeting, but got to talk to him for 15 minutes. And he sent me his personal monthly to-do list, and it had items on it like hug my wife every single day, make sure that I have dinner with my wife at least 3 times a week, whatever. And he's older. They don't have as much family dinner. And I'm looking at it thinking he's treating his relationships, he's treating the things he wants to become an expert at in life the same way that he treats the things he wanted to become an expert at in work. And part of me thinks, well, shouldn't you just hug your wife every single day because you love her? And the answer is like, yeah, sure. But if you know yourself and you know that that's not what's happening, or that's not the pattern that's been established, sometimes it does make sense to start with the check boxes, because eventually those check boxes are going to transform into habits that you actually enjoy, and you won't need them, and you won't need the check boxes anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the wording that I've used to try to convey what you just said is that, and it's in scripture where it talks about turning the hearts of fathers to their children and children to their fathers. It's like, my heart has gone from being harder to softened towards my children. It's like, I have a new heart, and like, it's hard to explain. Like, not usually a way that a guy expresses himself, but like, I feel the difference. And I used to interiorly complain when my wife was like, okay, make sure to put the girls down and read to them. Now I really enjoy putting them down and reading to them. And I look forward to it. Like, we have a good time, me reading the story, and then like we'll get to a good point in a book, and I'm like, okay, let's stop. And they're like, no, read more. And I was like, okay, only one more page. And they know that they can usually get another chapter out of me if I say one more page. But we have this awesome opportunity to relate with each other in a way that I hadn't done with the older kids, and I rejoice at being able to do it with the younger. That's all we have time for today. If you like what you've heard on the podcast, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and encourage your friends and family to do the same. If you want to support the work of Strong Catholic Dad, you can become a monthly sponsor for as little as $5 a month. I quit my job back in 2018 to found Strong Catholic Dad. And as of right now, it's not enough to pay the bills. So anything that you can do is appreciated. Until next time, be strong in faith, strong in hope, and strong in love. God bless.